Am I clearly audible? Okay. Starting in three, two, one, go. We prefer in such a world where Mitt Romney would have won the presidential election of 2012 against Obama. Why is that so? Before we get even deep into that, we need to first understand what is the real concerns of the president. What was the real problem of Obama being the president in the first term? So the issues were like understand the first issue of being Obama president was at that point. Firstly, he reformed the healthcare to certain point that at that point where the healthcare would have looked good, but there were multiple issues on it, and eventually the healthcare was worse in the Obama side. First of all, secondly, he made a lot of economic policies, which around like increasing a lot of things. Like at that point, it actually ruins a lot of business friendly organizations in a lot of sectors. Second issue was that. Thirdly, he actually has a lot of issues in the Middle East as well. Like understand, he had a lot of drone strikes in the Obama's time period. What Obama's time period. So they at that point it's becomes a really become a problem because from the USA perspective, US has wanted to be the as a top power in the Middle Eastern section of the world, and eventually Obama was a diplomatic leader who didn't think quite much of it, and they were trying to be really friendly with the some of the some of the states in the Middle East, which was a really problem because the US's influences were actually getting worse off, and eventually had a lot of problems. And even and this concerns have a basic core issue. The core most important issue of this debate was the healthcare. Why is that so? Because the healthcare is principally a lot of principal necessity for every human being in the world, every human being on their country or not. The citizens deserve a better healthcare system that is going to help them, not going to ruin their bank or something. So why we prefer Mitt Rooney over Obama? The first thing was for our first argument of this debate was healthcare reforming. Like understand the premise of this argument was pretty simple. Romney, along with many Republicans with her side, actually opposed the Affordable Care of the also known as the Obamacare Act. Why is that so? Because the critics actually argued that the whole Obamacare can actually lead to an increased government intervention in the healthcare sector, which is actually a harmful thing. Why is that so? Because it has a really big issue of like stifling the whole innovation of it, and eventually secondly negatively impacting the whole healthcare providers. This was a issue because why is that so? Because of something you're calling a higher government regulation, you are actually ruining the whole healthcare system, which is actually a crucial part of a citizen, a crucial part of the citizen's life as well. Their life actually runs over it. So why is this premise is actually why what is the crucial harm of this argument? The main harm of their side of the world was that this is actually like firstly stifling the innovation of it. Secondly, overall impact of the healthcare was going to be much negative. These two were the main harm. What if we and what were the benefits of our side if we preferred Mitt Rooney in this case? We could have like firstly the less government regulation. Secondly, more or less of market-oriented solutions. Now I'm going to get into why is that really an important thing. Before anything, is there a POI from closing opposition? Three, two, one. Okay, seeing none. So now the healthcare reformation. Like understand in the Romney had a plan. Romney is showed the plan to the public in the healthcare that they're gonna bring a certain alternative approach that have included firstly a more or less a market oriented solution, and secondly a less government regulation. Why is the less government regulation is actually going to be better? Firstly, it's gonna be better because the Obamacare was literally sort of exploiting. They're just calling it a less government regulation and just holding a lot of holding a lot of things of the market that's gonna actually increase the prices in a lot of sectors. Firstly, and secondly, when it had something called less more government regulation, a lot of innovation were actually broken down. What if a lot of innovation was actually blocking off by the private sector and other sorts of things? At that point, it becomes a really problematic thing. Why is that so? Because firstly, the healthcare needs to be regularly updating, not in a like a single specific scenario, right? The your body parts change. Your body parts is diseases can change. You need a better healthcare overall. When it's actually stifling the whole innovation, at that point it becomes a really problematic thing for the people. It becomes the citizens are harming the principle or principal urgent necessity that actually been broken in outside of world. If we had seen that Romney was the president at that point, would it have been much better for us, as the healthcare wouldn't been much dipped and for the second time of Obama. My second, so that's the end of my argument. The specific impact of the argument is, firstly, we can actually solve the already done concerns about the government overreach in healthcare, and secondly, we can actually take down the negative impact on the healthcare and of the affordability and accessibility, and we can actually make it better. Second thing, why is the economic policies, like, understand why is this argument is going to be really important? Because the Romney's economic policies were centered around reducing government intervention and fostering certain businesses growth. Why is the businesses growth is really important? Because the businesses are growing at that point. The people are actually going to participate in that more as the business are going right now. So at that point, business are actually growing, and eventually this these sorts of these issues can be actually, the economic depression of 2008 was were in the Obama's time, right? After a certain point, you need better economic policies to actually cope up with the overall time, right? Mitt Romney during their campaign advocated for certain economic policies that actually often were more business friendly, and certain included certain proposals for lower amount of tax and reduced government regulation, and lastly, a generally more hands-off approach to the economy. These policies could have actually stimulated, firstly, a lot of economic growth than before. Secondly, encouraging a lot of investment. And thirdly, create more job opportunities, and eventually the economic scenario of that point would have been much better than this. And this is actually going to be like like more capable to actually for individuals to actually go into more of economic activity, and eventually get the economy back running faster than ever. And lastly, why is this important, really important? Because firstly, we have a potential accelerate. We could have had a potential acceleration of economic recovery. Secondly, we could have had more business and confidence on investment, which is going to be better in the overall spectrum. That's why we really prefer Obama. Or we really prefer Mitt Romney over Obama. We are extremely proud to propose.
Am I audible? Am I audible? Okay. Okay. Give me a second to set my timer. Okay. So I'll begin my speech in three, two, one. Panel, we need to note that factually we can only prefer something over the other when the other has more qualities over it. What then is this debate about? This debate is about comparatively analyzing the character and personhood of Mitt Romney to that of Barack Obama, and like forecasting how both worlds would be like. For Obama, we have his world already in status quo that we can refer to, but since Romney was never actually president, from like little things he has managed and like leadership positions he has held, we can foresee into how he also managed like the whole of the United States as the president. Okay. Now we need to come down to the level of politics. Panel, this debate is centrally on politics. And we need to understand that In politics just deals with a politician making policies, and these policies are supposed to remedy the problems of the people, to solve the problems of the people. And that is what this is about. Now, we need to understand that the personhood of Obama panel is Obama was a young African American man faced with the hardships of life. Things like gangs in the neighborhood, racism because of his color, financial lack, and insecurity, little fatherly love since he was abandoned by his father, and the list goes on. But then, aside all these struggles, panel, this is a man who worked so hard, and his ability to even go to Harvard in itself was clearly not by chance, but it was by extreme and undisputed hard work because of his background. This is an excellent man who took up the mantle of leadership to rule the whole of America.
Right.
I'll take you later. Mitt Romney, on the other hand, panel, is more of a businessman than a politician. Panel, this is a man born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Panel, Mitt Romney was more of a man interested in making profits, interested in like establishing more businesses and making more money. Obama's personality, on the other hand, was geared towards solving problems because he himself, growing up, has like faced multiple challenges and knows what the average American person goes through on an everyday basis. Mitt Romney was out of touch. Therefore, even if he makes policies, they are likely not going to remedy the problems of Americans because, first and foremost, the fact that he's out of touch means that he's not experiencing most of the problems he's supposed to even solve. So how then do you expect that is the burden living on government base? How then do you expect someone inherently who has never faced these challenges like at its raw form to solve a problem? Okay, unlike Obama who has been through all these things. Panel, we need to note that the Prime Minister makes some allegations which I find to be rather interesting in his speech. He talks about things like Obama made the healthcare system in America like worse off and the economic was ruined and stuff like that. But panel, you need to understand that the healthcare system in America became more inclusive for even black people when Obama became president. He passed things like Obamacare, which was a healthcare policy that seek to give like equal opportunities for Americans to get quality healthcare. According to research in itself, America is one of the places where you can get the best healthcare systems. And we have leaders like Obama pioneering all these things. That makes all of his claims false. And he didn't even give us any better analysis to like actually prove that even what he's claiming is even true in itself. He says things like Obama is more of a diplomatic leader and America seeks to be like the most powerful nation. But he's forgetting that when Obama was president of America, like the most wanted man on the earth, Osama bin Laden, was captured and executed by the US Marine Corps in his tenure of office. This is a man who is able to ensure security and safety of Americans in the whole wide world because this was a crazy psychopathic terrorist who was just killing people in like, whatever belief he had. But then this very man you are saying was too diplomatic and therefore can like sustain like the egoistic nature of Americans to be like the most dominating and powerful nation is in itself not even holding or standing this debate because of this classical example where this diplomatic man was able to get this so-called terrorist and finish him up. Now, the next thing you must note is that one more reason why Rumi is a terrible option and his word is not going to be preferable to Obama's words that it is recorded in video and on tape where this man, okay, was when speaking to his donors, was criticizing majority of Americans as seeing themselves as victims and they want government to solve all of their problems. This speech even came out and it affected his campaign. This man was a man who didn't have his whole party unanimously rallying up behind him. Okay, all these things I think that even contributed to his defeat, and this clearly shows that he had nothing better to offer. Like his word is not better than Obama's word. His personality is not better than Obama's personality as far as politics is concerned, which is why we don't need to even prefer him in any way in the first place. Okay, the thing is that his campaign was even so problematic because when the video leaked, it made Americans had this opinion about him that this is not a man who really cares about us to begin with. Because why would he say such mean things as feeling like making Americans feel like they are a burden to the state? Because even if you are a burden to the state, you are a property of the state, and it's the burden of the state to actually take care and provide for these individuals. Okay, he even regretted to the point that he came to apologize, but that apology cannot undo what has already been said. With that, I have trashed all of the government benches case. Now let me tell you why I have trashed it. Now, like the health, like the project that is, yeah, hello. Yes, can you hear me? Yes, now I can hear you. It's ready. Okay, how many minutes do I? How many minutes or seconds do I have? Okay, okay, sure. So I'm going to continue my speech in three, two, one. Panel, we need to understand that taking going through the track record of Barack Obama, Obama implemented like healthcare, like insurance, which was like Obamacare, which improved the healthcare sector or like the healthcare system of the American population. Okay. Now the next thing he does is that this man also goes a long way to improve conditions of service of like personnel like the US Army, like the US Marines, okay, and did so many other things. Obama was an individual who was like all inclusive, and we need to understand that, like in the concept of liberal democracies, where everyone's views matter, where rights need to be respected, Obama was the only leader who was able to practically implement this. How was this done? You can realize that Obama was the first. America was the first nation during his tenure to embrace and accept people who are under the LGBTQ community, and then it was under his tenure that they were reduced like levels of racism. All these things are like a better world we have because like US is the icon for democracy, and here people's rights and views have been respected to the degree that even that sexuality is not like used to harm them or anything. Okay, where they have rights and they are protected by the states. This wouldn't have happened under the businessman that is Rumi's administration. That is why Obama is better, and there's no need for us to refer him to Obama because Obama has a wonderful track record where Obama symbolized unity, hope,
Am I clearly audible? Am I Well, I'm gonna take POI verbally and raise POI at the fifth minute. Don't interrupt right before that. So I'll be starting my speech in three, two, one. At the very first place, summarizing the leader of the opposition's entire speech, he just only catered the black persons, and actually he said that eventually he made another sort of claims that secondly he made claims that Romy is more likely to be a businessman rather than a politician. Thirdly, he said the healthcare is much more inclusive for the black people. These are the claims that the leader of the opposition made. Now, let me tell you why that aren't true at the very first place. So, whenever he just claimed that Mitt Romney is nothing just a businessman and his main incentive is to make money. Let me tell you why that is important in terms of the America's current condition. In 2008 and 9, there is a huge economic recession that your country has suffered, right? So eventually, your country's people are actually suffering, or United States is suffering to actually hold the power in their hand, as economy has a total background and back hold the entire back of power in the entire world. As an incentive of a regular American citizen, all the person would want to be much more prominent and powerful in the entire United States. uh, as a United States to the entire world. So they want the power to hold in their hand and actually dominate in the entire world. So eventually, your economy
You're
must have to
right.
be boosted, and it's about that, right? I'm not taking. Uh, your economy must have to be boosted at that time. So eventually, whenever such sort of things are actually you need to cater about the economy, Bush and this also add analysis to our economic policy argument that eventually Mitt Romney actually added a new economical policy and which has a better impact over the and outcome over the United States current condition. Understand, your country has suffered hugely in the economical recession, and it needs to be cured within a
You
very short amount of within a short time. Eventually, not taking. Eventually, at the very first place, though Barack Obama cured that, but eventually the policy that Mitt Romney has proposed, or the policy was the economical policy that Romney given are much more prominent in those terms, and that recession thing would be recovered very faster than the Barack Obama's one. Secondly, understand, this also adds an analysis to our economical policies argument. Understand, at the very first place, whenever your country, Barack Obama actually put some sort of given preferences to actually economical or economical balances at the very first place rather than curing the economy, which has an adverse impact over it, and that also actually it hammered the entire process of getting healed to your economy at the very first place, which was not incentive or actually the incentive of that thing at the very first place. So understand, he said that it would be much the healthcare is much more inclusive in terms of for black people.
you're
But
right.
we have showed you at the fifth minute. We have showed you how actually the healthcare is actually being catered to, and your country citizen must have to be catered in a very short way. Eventually, we have shown you how Barack Obama's policies are actually hammering the entire healthcare system of the United States, and how roomies one are better. Eventually, if you try to say that eventually the healthcare system of the black people are much more prominent in those terms, eventually you have to see at the utility. And most of the people are in the United States are actually white people. So eventually, it's not a good outcome or good scenario at the very first place to actually uh, give such sort of beneficial healthcare only for the or the black people. Eventually, they could be also being catered if the entire policy would be much more. If the entire healthcare policy is improvised at the very first place, then both the communities, black peoples and white peoples, are being catered at the very first place. And what argument I'm going to add at the very first place? I'm going to add, understand the foreign policy. Uh, 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 the foreign policy approach at the very first place. Understand why this is important. Rome eventually at the foreign policy approach is much more necessary because eventually the in the Middle East crisis, eventually Barack Obama's approaches are much more diplomatic, and thus that has created problems. How understand? At the very first, whenever Barack Obama taken such sort of measures and diplomatic measures, and also some sort of actions in the Africa, both are not legitimate enough to be actually have control over the Middle East. As he has taken diplomatic decisions over the over Middle East, that has creating problem, being focus, presenting himself as a weak person, and eventually getting ignored by the Middle East, and thus his control is over and more or less loose in the Middle East at the very first place. So eventually, that thing is, on the contrary, whenever the policy that actually the foreign policy that actually Mitt Romney actually tried to introduce is much more prominent in those terms. NEP wise, one, two, three. No engagement from the opposition. So eventually, that at that particular moment, the foreign policy approaches of Mitt Romney are way more better in a comparison rather than that. So eventually, that has much more better impact over this. So eventually, understand. Our fourth argument is Supreme Court nomination. How this actually works. Eventually, the president has the right to select the Supreme Court legal justice Supreme Court or parties, right? So eventually, whenever they have the power, the Mitt Romney tried to propose a conservative Supreme Court verdict. Why is that? This is because in some sort of cases, the things of actually being conservative in some sort of cases, like actually gun laws or other sort of racial measures that our opposition yellow tried to also cater, these things are all much more prominently catered in our society as in our world. If Mitt Romney was given the presidency at the very first place rather than the Barack Obama, because he has introduced such sort of Supreme Court nominations at the very first place, which actually has given the decreased the fear of American people and increased the life security over and over again. So eventually, summarizing our entire arguments, we have shown you how actually it caters to the economic policies. Secondly, it is actually catering to the foreign policy and how it's actually putting betterment in the healthcare reform, and eventually how it's actually legislative section of the country is improvising, and climate change policy is been also been catered. Eventually, if any sort of things the CG tried to claim and take away, that shouldn't be valid enough. So that is why we are proud to propose.
Hello, am I audible? All right, that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to just set my timer and then I'll start in 3, 2, 1. I think, panel, you need to consider a lot of things in today's debate. What you get from opening half is a bit of characterization that you get only from leader of up. I think leader of up does a very good work by telling you the personalities of these people. He tells you that one, Obama has been a president. It means you can look at his track record. But secondly, this guy has not been a president. It means you don't have anything to fall back on. What you then need to fall back on is leadership profile over the years and his personality and overall perception that he posits to the entire general public. That is what is necessary to consider in today's debate. And he proves to you systematically and how inherently people see Obama to be a source of hope, a source of light, and that particular is better for a government. I think I'm going to deal with two things particularly and largely in today's debate. One, I'm going to tell you about legitimacy of Obama's administration. But second, I'm going to do a whole engagement to OJ's case because you only get two things from them. The only thing they tell you is that there has been an inherent harm in Obama's administration. That is, he reformed health policies and you incurred a lot like a small like harms, and that alone was their case. The second thing they tell you is that we think during his time there were like things like a lot of drones flying in Middle East. We think those things are not a lot of things like it's not a well sophisticated thing for you to win this debate because you then need to do a whole lot of comparative analysis to why this context mandates that this person or this person should lead America. That is why the team that wins today's debate is opening opposition on the legitimacy of Obama's administration panel. One is the incumbency, right? We think incumbent presidents typically have an advantage of legitimacy in elections. That is, they have the opportunity to showcase their achievements, and voters often give them the priority. And that is why the media always almost gives them this priority as well and publishes them. But then Obama, as the incumbent, had an advantage of his presidential record during the campaign. Because notice the mere fact that Obama already had his 4 years term and still won this election should make or possess a sort of credence and believability that the public had in him. We think that his records of his past presidency of some sort of legitimacy due to things like experience and his good track record. The second thing why he had a bit of legitimacy over this guy was on demographic factors. I think my first speaker does a lot on this. I'm just going to touch a few on it. I think Obama's campaign was able to mobilize and appeal to a diverse range of demographics, including minorities and even young voters. Being the very first ever African American to pierce through the very tight cloud of white supremacy, it did things, panel. One, it sets a precedent that indeed America is not being so white centered as a lot of as a lot of international countries and the international front sees them. This is important then because that perception of American pushes a lot of people away, and investors who may come to America may feel threatened due to these racist tendencies. We think that this thing or this context needed someone who should come to erase this perception, and that is what Obama just did when he came. Such perception was erased then, because then now people think that, oh, like America, even in as much as like they are minority, they were able to still get a minority person coming out as a leader. We think that in itself was very good to its local economy, because then you had a new lot of investor confidence as in people and in that social policies in that respect. But then next thing to say is that it also helped the foreign policy engagement with other nations. We think his regime quite a changing, evolving new American demographics. It was seen as a factor that favored the democratic candidate, and his strength was evident in the election results. Panel could ask, why is this then relevant to the debate? Two things. One, these two pieces of ideas shows that even before the election, a lot more people already saw the context of Obama's impact, and that already offered him a sort of legitimacy already before the election. I think the whole thing you get from opening government is to paint a lot like just some few harms that happen, and they think that that could just win the debate. We think those harms could be explainable and could be justifiable. Why? Generally, a lot of nations still fail no matter the good policies that they bring, because of the existence of the unknown, because of that uncertainty that exists due to externalities like climate change, really intrinsic errors that you cannot correct. It means that you will still incur harms. But the debate then shifts from whether there were harms in Obama's administration to now you being able to justify these harms vis-a-vis with the overall collective good that Obama did. For up teams to win today's debate, they need to prove that these harms cannot be justified. But these harms were very irreparable, and that is why we should not care about the good. You're not able to do that. That is why they lose. Panel, I'm going to explain why this health reformation was necessary and why it is still justified and why it still had a lot of good. Panel, that prior to this, there was a 2008 financial crisis. The health system was not really not inclusive at all, as Bliss tells you. But far from that, it did not reach a lot of people and it was not affordable at all. A lot of insurance companies charge a lot, but then they do not even cater for chronic conditions like cancer and other diseases that you have like really chronic conditions. Because as I come to the insurance company, the argument was that I just signed for the insurance. It means that they will not take care of any chronic condition that I had. That was particularly bad. Obama did was to bring an act that you needed a trade-off by sacrificing the wealthy and working guys, and you quite tax them a bit more to get more money to make the health system more inclusive, likely accessible. But rather, this also would also help more chronic conditions, which is more endemic in such a place like America. You have a lot of more chronic conditions, and this was very impactful. That is why Bliss tells you that now America has the best health care system you can now think of. I think this social inequality was bridged then because he only taxed the guys who had the money to be able to make this more accessible. I think that in itself involved a trade-off that was justified for a bigger good. That in itself good thing. Panel, what did Obama do and what was the good thing that merited us to still vote for him in that regard? I think one is on the foreign policy. Obama's handling of foreign affairs, particularly the operation that led to the death of Osama bin Laden and terrorism in itself, was viewed positively by many Americans and international funds. Romney faced challenges in convincing voters that he would be very effective in dealing with such big international issues. I think that in itself was good because then in Obama's time, you had a lot of corporations and multilateral and bilateral corporations coming in. We think they had a lot of free trade because then you had a lot of foreign investment because there was more lax restrictions and all that. That in itself revolved America's economy. But then the second thing to talk about is on liberalism. I think largely Democrats often embrace liberal principles. They advocate for things like government intervention to address social and economic inequalities. That is why it was justified. These things were good because then you had a more liberal America in that regard, and that was good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Right. Could you just kindly confirm if I'm audible or not? No, no, it's okay. It's okay. I consented to it. It's okay. Streamed. Right then, if I'm audible, I'll be starting, right? So this is Sarthak, going as the member. No preferred pronouns. Do not interrupt me. Ask for a PO in the chat. I'll try and respond, right? Opening, be ready with one. Right then, starting my speech in three, two, one. What has been the entirety of opening case? It has largely been myopic, right? Why do I go ahead and tell you this? Because understand the position that US occupies in the global political scenario. At any point of time, the whatever happens in the US election has a direct bearing in terms of whatever happens to the welfare of the rest of the people in the world, right? At a point in time when neither of the opening halves goes ahead and talks about this or engages with this, they immediately fall out of the debate, right? I think like OG tries tries to go ahead and like touch upon this issue, but their entire case is a what if, right? Their entire case is that okay, what if Mitt Romney won? This is bad, this is bad, this is bad, but what if Mitt Romney won, right? For them to go ahead and we win this debate on that binary, they had to go ahead and explicitly make it clear to you what were the exact character or the actor motivations for Mitt Romney to go ahead and enact the policies that they suggested that Mitt Romney would, right? There's no mechanization whatsoever, right? They go ahead and throw words out in the air, right? They go ahead and tell you, okay, Medicare will be existing. So as a result of which, like Medicare will be something different, as a result of which welfare will be much better off. Again, you can go ahead and check your notes. No mechanization, no impacting whatsoever, right? The only thing that they go ahead and tell you that if Mitt Romney was there, it would have been different. How and why entirely missing in their case, right? And as for opening, again, they engage on that same thing that they go ahead and talk about, like these sort of communities that are helped by it. While we don't go ahead and necessarily disagree with it, I think the impact and scaling of that particular thing is something that is amiss and needs to be clarified much better for them to go ahead and take this debate, right? And while I get, no matter how hardworking Obama was, or like how where he came from, it does not prove any justification why he should have gone ahead and won a second term in power, right? What is the main extension that I go ahead and give to you, right? We agree with opening in terms of this sort of like this having impacts in the global scenario, but in different reasons, like openings mechanization for this sort of like US going ahead and projecting like power is something that is intrinsically contained with the US, right? What do I mean by this? They go ahead and tell you that okay, US, like US has the incentive to keep power, and then if they lose it, it's bad, right? They don't go ahead and explain why is it something that is bad, or neither do they go ahead and explain why them keeping the power is something that is essentially good, right? This is something that I'll go ahead and engage with right now. Understand why. Whatever happens, US has always been the custodian of the global order, right? And when it has been the custodian of the global order since World War II, it has given the world in terms of like democratic values and so on and so forth, right? At a point in time whenever US goes ahead and loses out on any sort of this sort of thing, it has a global impact in terms of what is the ideal form of government, and that has a direct bearing on the well-being of the people, right? Because understand that democracy at all points of time remains a forum for which to people
UI.
to go ahead and exist, right? Even if something that is even if it is something that is imperfect at all points in time, there's still scope for it to improve, right? So democracy being at the like being the ideal form of government projected by the US as a power holder is something that is absolutely essential for the libertarian and the humanitarian values that are present in terms of social welfare and whatnot, right? This
UI.
is something that we believe is something very important at all points of time, right? Having said that, the biggest impact that Mitt Romney's re-election would have had is that it would have stopped the election of Donald Trump in the first place, right? Why do I go ahead and say this? Panel, understand what is Donald Trump's essential election policy, right? Donald Trump's essential, yeah. Hello, what's up? Hello, where's the judge? Hello. It's totally fine. Oh, sorry, sorry. Please just mute yourself. Sorry. I stopped at 3 minutes. Yeah, like please make sure you don't take that into account. Right. I'll be restarting my speech in 3, 2, 1, right? So the biggest impact that we go ahead and propose to you is that it would have stopped the re-election of Donald Trump, right? Understand why is the re-election of Donald Trump is something, the election of Donald Trump is something that is essentially important to this particular time period. Understand what is the period 2012 to 2016 looks like, right? It looks like global media is reaching a new height, technology is developing, media narratives and everything else is strengthening at a degree that has never been seen before due to the advent of technology, right? It means that whosoever goes ahead and captures the social, circle at that point of time has a dominant presence in that particular scenario, right? What does it look like? It looks like social media and other form of other forms of like you know popular media having a left leaning ideology, which means that whenever there's a democrat in power, you have like these left leaning ideologies in place, which means that movies have propagate certain values which resonate more with the right, more with the left than with the right wing politics at all points of time, right? This is something that Donald Trump went ahead and exploited in order to go ahead and win the elections, right? Why? Because understand that Donald Trump has his entire election policy is to go ahead and tap into the fears and insecurities that come from this sort of right wing right wing fringe movements that had no
UI.
place in mainstream, and that is something strengthened by this sort of like dominance of the left wing narratives at all points in time, right? What happens is that due to this advent of media and due to the dominance of this left leaning ideologies, it created insecurities in the dominant classes in terms of the whites in the middle America, which is where Donald Trump draws most of his supporters from, right? At such a point in time when you have these people propagating a particular dominant narrative, you have these these people getting insecure and feeling that they are losing out their place, right? This is something that is exploited by Donald Trump in order to go ahead and gain this vote, right? This is something that was clear in the election results as well, right? Donald Trump, despite winning the elections, did not actually win the popular support, and this is something that can be done in the US elections because their voting is some sort of a college representative system where you can winner takes all system, where you go ahead and win one particular state, you go ahead and take all the seats that come with this particular state, right? So this sort of political political campaigning methods where you can go ahead and tap into the fears and insecurities that come with a more of a globalized era, it allowed Donald Trump to go ahead and capture these votes and go ahead and consolidate his rule in power, right? Why is that a bad thing? One, I go ahead and already tell you why the US being at the center of power is something important, right? Understand Republican ideology at any point of time means that you have to go ahead and strengthen the world values and so on and so forth, right? Understand that when you have this sort of America first sort of value that Republicans go ahead and propagate, Donald Trump, especially in terms of this sort of chauvinistic patriotism, it goes ahead and creates the idea that other people do not belong, right? And secondarily, it means that democracy may not be the strongest as long as his his rule of using an iron fist to rule the entire state remains, right? This goes ahead and harms the image of democracy and America all over the world, right? This goes ahead and has a large scale welfare impact on people all over the globe, and that is something that we are not willing to accept at any point in time, right? Understand secondarily, what happens is that with the coming of Donald Trump, with the coming of Mitt Romney in power, what would have happened is that this sort of alienation of the right wing net is something that would not have happened because of them being in power. That would have stopped this sort of capturing the center of power in America. I will continue in my next speech. Vote. Closing of.
Am I audible, Chair? Am I audible? Okay, thank you. Can I set my timer? So, 7, sorry. Okay, I would prefer pure. You can just say pure I because I'm not looking at the screen of my phone. And I'll take, yeah, just that's just that. Yeah, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Chair, I think it is important that I remind the House that this is a prefers motion. At what point do we prefer one thing over another is what this debate is supposed to be answering. In this context, we are supposed to be preferring Romney to Barack Obama if we are government side, and preferring Obama to Romney if we are opposition side, right? I think that clarity is important for the next speakers, right? Questions to be answered in today's debate. One, did America benefit from the presidency of Obama? Or would it have benefited better from the presidency of Mitt Romney? Those are the questions, that the burdens that lead in today's debate for both benches, right? Anyways, I will start my speech by responding to a few things really, and then my whip speaker is going to focus mostly on rebuttals. Panel, the main problem that exists within the speech of the member of government is that they come up with the aim and say that the only thing that Romney's election would have done was stop the re-election of Barack Obama. Then they go on and on about how the voting system actually takes place and how votes actually are casted and happen and how they have been exploited. But that is not what this debate is about, right? Which means that by the beginning of their speech, they're already out of the debate. The debate is for you to compare the current status quo to say, well, this is what America looks like today because Barack Obama got re-elected as president. And then this is what America could have been had Romney been debated. But then why is our what is our speech about in today's debate? I'm going to pose a question one. What things did Barack Obama achieve that Romney would not have been able to achieve? One, passage of the Affordable Care Act. One, what you get is, this is a point that you get exclusively from side closing closing opposition as an extension. One, the passage of the Affordable Care Act. One, it was a major piece of healthcare legislation that was passed by the Obama administration. This act reduced the number of uninsured Americans. Now, why is this so important in today's debate? We have to understand the prevailing problems that existed within America by that time of the era. A lot of Americans had healthcare problems. This means that they could not afford basic healthcare assistance or healthcare help, right? This Affordable Care Act actually meant that a lot of Americans could then afford basic health, right, which was important. It enabled people to access adequate health care. Secondly, it increased the lifespan of people and thus improving their standards of living overall, right? That's an impact from our side of the house. Now, why Romney would not have been able to give ACA to Americans? One, the act faced strong opposition from the Republicans. Let us remember that Romney was a Republican himself, and the president is always a pony of the people who are behind him. And this time, and the people who were behind Romney were the Republicans. Republicans were against the ACA, right? Secondly, Romney's platform called for repealing the ACA, so it is unlikely that he would have been able to pass the American Recovery Investment Act, right? As he had different approaches to economic stimulus. We have told you on the opening that Romney was a businessman, right? Which means that he mostly focused on things that made profit, even with the taxpayers' money. So we think that because of that factor, Romney would not have been able to pass the ACA. Now, the stimulus package was a key part of Obama's response to the Great Recession. It included tax cuts, infrastructure spending, and aid to states, right? I think that it is also important that Obama is elected
Right.
at a time after the 2008-2007 recession, which means that all countries, including America, were facing a great economic problem, right? And then the policies that Obama was running were policies that were actually going to make America great again. And because America became great again economically and became economical giant, we think that it is then justified for Obama to have been re-elected because these are long-term policies that also needed his presence in office to actually monitor they are going through, right? Also, it expanded unemployment benefits and food stamp assistance, right? While Romney did propose a stimulus plan of his own, it was smaller in scope and focused more on tax cuts and rate regulation. Now, why this would have been less impactful? This would have been less impactful because it only helped a fewer number of people. Now, what have I told you so far? So far, I have compared the policies that were being proposed by Romney compared to the policies that were being compared to Barack to the policies that were being proposed by Barack Obama, right? So Americans actually heard to say that the Romney promises, this is what Barack Obama promises, and we actually want to go with this that Obama promises. Now, to further on explain on a utilitarian perspective, one, the principle of utilitarian is actually fulfilled through Obama's policies. Obama's policies focused on expanding access to healthcare and social problems, which improve the well-being of a large number of people. Panel. This means that a lot of people in America. This means that
She isn't audible to us as well.
No, she isn't audible.
Am I audible now? I just lost connection because of an electrical problem. Am I audible now? Okay, can I then resolve my start? You said 1 minute and what? Okay, so as I was saying, that that two policies that were proposed for Americans to vote on was the policy of Barack Obama and the policy of Romney. The policy of Romney did not cater for the Americans who were underprivileged. It only catered for people who were already well off and in a state of being able to afford on their own, right? Which is what all Republicans are pushing for. Right. While least on the other hand, Obama's policy looked at what poor people or underprivileged people in America in terms of healthcare, in terms of these people cannot afford food because we have had a great economic crisis. And what are we going to do to help these people? And we think that America benefited greatly from that, because as it stands, America is one of the countries that has got the greatest or one of the good social programs that actually cater for people who are underprivileged and people who cannot afford for food for themselves, as we think that is what our governments ought to do. Now, also, there's also the time factor. Obama's approach is focused on issues like climate change that affected the future generation. As we see today, that Barack Obama, even though he's way out of office, America is still one of the countries that are well equipped in terms of coming up with material that caters for climate change, right? We think that because of such policies, it is good that Obama actually became president and got re-elected, right? Another thing is the legalization of gay marriages. We think that this is a great social issue because a lot of people are being killed for being gay in other countries, while in America you can exist freely. We think because you can't stop people from being gay, policies like Obama's that allowed for gay marriages actually protected these people, and we think that then America then got to benefit from that. Another thing, ongoing projects from the previous presidency. Let us look at the realistic time factor of what presidency, right? A lot of policies have been put and policies are not completed because a person has to leave office. That's the re-election of Barack Obama ensured that his policies were completed and that all the things that he heard and all the things that he had proposed, you would see that they actually come through, right? Stacy is going to expand on that as well as give a his speech. Thank you.
Hello, am I audible? Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, perfect. I've mentioned in the express. Could you just confirm you have received? Right. I'll be starting. Just give me like 5 seconds to set up my timer. Right. Assuming I'm still audible, short talk him. No, like try to give the POI in the text space. I'll be looking for it. Do not interrupt me at any point in time, right? Starting my Swift speech, then in three, two, one. It is relevant when I go ahead and prove to you that this sort of thing, like one event had a direct outcome on the other. So when I go ahead and compare the status quo to the alternative that I'm going ahead and presenting, it is relevant that when one particular thing led particularly to an outcome that is undesirable, which is in this case Donald Trump's election in the first place, right? I go ahead and tell you how the media scape and the polarizing narratives change for them to go ahead and attain power the way they did, and the harmful impact that goes ahead and comes with it, right? Understand why this sort of like entire argumentation is something that is relevant and something that goes ahead and defeats the points made by like closing and opening operation, right? Understand when they go ahead and talk about the entirety, like made the entire debate of about Medicare and things like that. What happens essentially is that like it becomes imperative when you go ahead and realize that this sort of Mitt Romney going ahead and winning the elections was not as opposed to like this something like Medicare as Donald Trump is, right? At a point in time when this sort of thing is going ahead and is happening, it means that their own impacts are far less impactful because of Donald Trump getting elected in the first place, right? Which means that this has not only has an impact that goes ahead and betters the case in comparison to their, it nullifies their own case in terms of the impact that this sort of has, right? Continuing on the idea then that I was going to go ahead and express, right? Understand why US as like has to go ahead and project democratic values onto the world, because simply if they don't, is something that is that is more likely to go ahead and propel people like Putin and Xi to go ahead and take some degree of power and wage war and or wage oppressive practices that are present, right? Understand why is it something that is occurring with the direct occurrence of Donald Trump, right? Understand in order to go ahead and double down on his entire narrative of protecting American values and patriotism, they went ahead and withdrew support from the NATO, right? We go ahead and threatened to even dissolve NATO. One, two, they even went ahead and proposed the idea that Taiwan is something that they're not going to go ahead and protect at any point in time because America comes first. That is the way they went to go ahead and popularize the narrative of America being first, to appeal to the voters who are there in that particular space who felt threatened by the polarized narratives that was present in the ascent days of media, which is 2012 to 2016, right? As a result of which, what happened is that it allowed like more people with unscrupulous means to go ahead and project the kind of power that was not already present with this sort of people. This looks like Putin going ahead and telling that dictatorships are fine, them going ahead and becoming more bold in the actions that they go ahead and take, right? Why is it a bad thing? Simply because it goes ahead and affects the livelihood of a lot of people than simply American citizens, right? I think on the scale of impact alone, in terms of them going ahead and preventing the election of Donald Trump in the first place, goes ahead and helps these people to like election of Donald Trump goes ahead and helps these people to have a much better life than before, right? Because their own impact, like which is basically Medicare versus like Obamacare versus no Obamacare, in terms of that, I think even Donald Trump's election goes ahead and hampers that, because from day one it is something that has been discouraged and something that has been promised to be dissolved by Donald Trump himself, right? Understand that at a point in time this debate like goes ahead and takes place, you have to consider what are the long-term impacts or something like that, and secondly what are the large-scale impacts, right? You cannot just restrain this debate, especially about American politics, which currently is the custodian of the global order, to something like that, right? At a point in time, then you have to go ahead and consider the impacts of what happens when Donald Trump gets elected. Why doesn't he get elected when Mitt Romney is someone that gets elected? One, they have the power to go ahead and make sure that the right-wing narrative is not something that is completely marginalized by the growing left-wing narrative in the polarized media, right? Secondly, it also happens so that Mitt Romney has some degree of power to go ahead and stand up to Donald Trump. Because understand that Mitt Romney and Donald Trump have been on the opposite side of the Republican Party as a whole, right? At a point in time when you have one actor, curbing down on the power of someone of another actor who poses a greater harm to these sort of people, you go ahead and support them, right? By winning those elections, Mitt Romney ensures that Donald Trump does not win the next election or even get a nomination, because understand that even if he like somehow gets to manage a nomination, an incumbent president going ahead and not even being fielded for their election next time means the party loses, which means don't there's a good possibility that Obama himself comes back to power in 2016, right? This is something that you have to go ahead and consider at all points in time, right? Understand when this happens, right? Understand when this sort of thing happens. You go ahead and prevent Donald Trump from coming into power. That goes ahead and helps a lot, right? Having said that, then what are the impacts that comes with the speech debate, right? Understand what are the three houses that they go ahead and say, right? Let's go ahead and consider what OG
Pure,
says, right? OG's entire case is I'll like OG's entire idea is that okay, what if Mitt Romney was in power? What policy would they have elected? What global policy would they have
pure
taken? Right?
ice speaker.
This is based on a this is based on a hypothetical scenario at all points in time without any motivation for these actors to go ahead and actually carry out these things, right? When you go ahead and have these sort of things in place, you cannot go ahead and just speculate. You have to explain and mechanize why exactly will the actors that you have pointed out will act in the way that you think they will, right? Secondly, why does O case does not stand? Again, entire idea of O's case is that okay, Donald, Barack Obama is a one
Pure
hardworking
ice.
person who did a lot in order to go ahead and get into power. Well, I understand that, but again, that's not justification for why they exactly should go ahead and win a second term in power, right? Understand then, I think the main impacts that they also try to carry is in terms of foreign, global impacts in terms of how what is the approach of Barack Obama and so
Pure
on and
ice
so forth.
speaker.
Understand that the most impactful foreign foreign policy impact that they could have gotten, which was the assassination of Osama bin Laden, was already done at a point in time the 2012 elections were taking place, right? So what this means that their largest impact does not stand out. Understand what happens in the Obama era during the 2012 to 2016 section. What happens is that America goes ahead and loses global power because ISIS rampages across the Middle East. You have various other actors acting out in defiance of US power, and something that happens because Obama's lax attitude allows them to go ahead and engage on these sort of levels in the global economy and the global political sphere, right? When they go ahead and do that, it harms a lot of people. It does not allow them to go ahead and do it. Why is it better on our side of the house? Because understand that Republican values something that go ahead and put America first. So there's a incentive for them to go ahead and project power across the world, which helps them to maintain democratic values, liberal values, and helps the people all over the world. For all those reasons, vote. Closing down.
Am I audible? Am I audible? Okay. So I'll begin my speech. Okay. So I will begin my speech in three, two, one. Panel. The great clashes that exist within today's debate is number one, what policy would have benefited American citizens in the long run, right? The second clash that then exists is would have American citizens benefited more from Romney than they've already did from Obama, right? This is what we particularly get from the first half, right? Panel. We think that even if Romney was going to get into power, his achievements would have never gotten to Obama's achievement, right? This is what you particularly get from extension by when Kayleen is giving you her speech. She tells you that, okay, Roman comes and tells us, okay, we're going to have an economic policy whereby, okay, we're going to be lowering taxes, right? Panel. We think that at a point in time where Romney thinks he's going to boost economic growth, okay, panel, we think that could have been possible in the short run, panel, but we don't think that would have benefited America in the long run. Panel, we give you a preference matrix whereby we prefer a person in power caters for the largest number of people, right? And caters for them in the long run, right? So at a point in time when we then lower taxes, what is going to happen? It means we're going to be having economic growth in the short run. But what is going to ultimately happen? It means that we are lowering taxes at the expense of government revenue, right? This means that at a point in time in the long run, we're going to discover that we're going to even have higher interest rates and inflation because now the government has to spend more than it is getting, which is something we greatly do not value, which is what the government bench has been feeding us this entire time, right? The second thing that we tell you, okay, let's say we buy for a second that okay, maybe this economic policy would have happened, right? We think that at a point by we try to boost economic growth by lowering tax rates, right? We think we benefit this would likely to benefit others at the expense of maybe the middle class even. And in the long run, we think that would have even resulted in strikes or revolutions or however at a point in time where people have realized, okay, we are being exploited for others to be benefited, right? Which is something we don't value. But no, we think that we prefer a world whereby the citizens are benefited in the long term, in the long run, and the greater number of citizens is actually valued, right? Which is what Kayleen tells you by the principle of impact, right? We think, okay, we think that the closing government's case has been okay. We think that we are going to be debating the principle of impact, who is going to benefit the most. Okay, Pano, we get that people were going to be benefiting from Rooney's policies, right? But partner, we think this is a comparative whereby we need to whereby we think we need to weigh how many people are going to be benefited by this principle or policies that Romney had said. We think a smaller number of people was going to be benefited by his healthcare policies. Only a certain number was going to be benefited in the short run, panel. But what do we tell you about the ACA that Obama actually puts out there? It tells you that okay, he's what do we then achieve with the ACA? We think this is number one, an inclusive and quality healthcare where everyone is now being included, be it you're gay, be it you're black or you're white, right? We think in the long run, the ACA has proved to help the great numbers of people, right? We think this has been beneficial to the great America. Why? We even see that even in today's status quo, America is one of the greatest healthcare facility. Why? Because Obama had to put in place the ACA, right? This is what we value. We value something that even after the president is long gone, it still exists, right? Okay, so what is that? What is the case of closing government? Okay, closing government comes in and tells us, okay, we think if Romney was going to get elected, right, it would have stopped the re-election of Barack Obama. No, we think number one, we think we already tell you that we value a world whereby a person is elected because of their own because of what the people want, right? We think that the re-election of Barack Obama was a must because it was to make sure that he finishes the policies that he enacted, right? Pano, we think that already Barack Obama, after the 2008 Great Depression, right? We think he already had inherited a sick economy, which had put policies to help and strengthen. We think that his re-election means that he was going to be seeing his policies in action and helping them to do better, right, whilst he was still in office. Pano, we don't think um we would have valued Romney's policies at such a time after America had suffered the great economic crisis, right? We thought that it was very important for Obama to have been in place, right? What is the second thing that what also do we get from the government bench, right? Okay, so government bench tries to tell us, okay, we think that Romney's healthcare policies meant that, okay, the it meant that insurance across state and offering tax credits to help people pay for insurance. Panel, we tell you this was going to help a smaller number of people. That's why we tell you the principle of impact in terms of utilitarianism, right? We tell you that we prefer something that helps the greater number of people or helps the people to have contribute, right? It means that we're going to be helping at least the people that belong to the to the poor economy, whilst ignoring the rest of the people. Where is the ACA by Obama? It had to benefit the larger number of people, even in the long run. Panel, as we already highlight, right? This is what you exclusively get from our extension, from closing opposition, right? The aspect of the principle of impact in terms of utilitarianism, who gets benefited in the long run. We think that even after Obama has left office, we still have climate change policies, panel, that existing in the first place, which we think Romney would have never even thought of because he's a Republican, right? He's a conservationist. He thinks of things in the short term, and he doesn't tend to actually think of things in the long run, which we think we have gotten from Obama because he has been thinking of the long run, right? We think the climate change policies are activated in the now generation rather than when he existed. And that's what we value for anyone who's going to become a president, whether in America or in any other government, right? Panel, we think by that we've never been proud to oppose. Okay, I'm coming. Put my phone on the charge, okay?
Hello, please, let's meet in your WhatsApp space.